Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Aruṇācala Ramanaya. Today I'm going to be talking about verses 2 and 3 of Upadēśa Taṉippākkaļ. The reason I'm going to talk about the two verses is because they're a pair of verses and they really have to be understood together. Before I talk about the verses themselves, I will explain a little bit about the context. That is, these two verses were originally composed as a part of Vācaka Kōvai. In the present Vācaka Kōvai, there's a chapter called Naraka Caturdaśī, which is explaining the conquest of Naraka, which consists of 5 verses, 3 composed by Muruganar, 2 by Bhagavan. The former are verses 81 to 83, in which Muruganar recorded what Bhagavan explained about the real import of Naraka Caturdaśī and Dīpāvali, and the latter are verses B4 and B5 in Vācaka Kōvai and 2 and 3 in Upadēśa Taṉippākkaļ, in the first of which Bhagavan summarized the ideas expressed in verses 181 and 182, and in the second of which he expressed the same idea as in verse 183, but in a simpler and clearer manner. So I will, when I talk about these verses, I'll talk about 181 and 182, then verse 2 of Upadēśa Taṇippākkaļ, then 183 and verse 3 of Upadēśa Taṇippākkaļ, because then how Bhagavan summarized what Muruganar said will become clear. And also, because Muruganar wrote more than Bhagavan, Muruganar's verse also helped clarify Bhagavan's verses are clear enough as they are, but it adds a bit more to them. Just to explain the context, Dīpāvali is one of the most popular and widely celebrated annual festivals in India. The name Dīpāvali is a Sanskrit term that means a series, avali, of lights, Dīpa, because the main day of the festival is celebrated by lighting numerous oil lamps, both in temples and homes, and also fireworks. So it's often called the Festival of Lights, in which the term light signifies the clear light of pure awareness. That is the original light, the light that illumines the mind, which in turn illumines the physical light that illumines the world. So the light of pure awareness is the light of all lights. There are some verses in Bandam, some question and answer verses that Bhagavan translated from Sanskrit, which nicely illustrate this, but I won't go into those now. In Hindi, Dīpāvali is called Diwali, which is a contraction of the original Sanskrit name. So this is the name by which it's usually known in North India and other countries. The way in which the festival is celebrated differs in some respects in different parts of India. But what they all have in common, it's all lighting of lights is common to all of them. And whereas in Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, the main day is celebrated on Naraka Caturdaśī, the 14th day of the waning moon between mid-October and mid-November. That is, Caturdaśī means the 14th, so it refers to the 14th day of the moon, in this case the waning moon. In other parts of India, it's celebrated on Amāvāsyā, which is the final day of the waning moon, in other words, the new moon, what in English we call the new moon, which is when the old phase of the moon comes to an end and a new phase begins, of the same month, which is usually one day later. Sometimes they coincide, sometimes they're one day later. It depends. Because Naraka Caturdaśī is determined by the phase of the moon in the morning. Amāvāsyā is determined by the phase of the moon in the evening. So sometimes they happen to come on the same day, but usually it's one day apart. The festival is also associated with different stories, but in Tamil Nadu, it is considered to be a celebration of Kṛṣṇa killing Narakāsura, who was a demon, asura, called Narakan, whom Bhagavan depicted in these verses as a personification of ego. So he uses the name Narakan here as a metaphor for ego. Naraka is a Sanskrit word. It's not only the name of this demon, but also a Sanskrit word meaning hell. In Tamil, these are distinguished by the ending. That is, in Tamil, Narakan is a personal noun and therefore refers to the demon, whereas Narakam or Naraku is they are both impersonal nouns, and therefore they refer to hell. In these verses, Bhagavan uses both the personal and impersonal forms of this noun and associates them closely because he refers to ego as the demon Narakan and the body, which is its abode, as Narakam or Naraku, hell. The core of Bhagavan's this is a point I wanted to make. That is, Bhagavan takes every opportunity to express the core of his teachings when he's asked to write about anything. So, for example, when he wrote about the significance of Dīpam, he explained it in terms of his teachings. And in so many other cases, we can see where Bhagavan is given an opportunity. When he wrote about when devotees wanted to celebrate his birthday, the verses he wrote is again drawing attention to his core teachings. So his core teachings are that the root of all problems, all misery, and all dissatisfaction is only ego, the false awareness that is always aware of itself as I am this body. Why is this the root of all problems? Because it's only when we rise as ego, experiencing ourselves as I am this body, that we experience dissatisfaction, desire, pleasure and pain, misery, and all the myriad problems of life. These all arise only when we rise as ego and thereby become aware of ourselves as I am this body. In waking and dream, we face problems of all kinds. In sleep, we face no problems. Why? Because in waking and dream, we have risen as ego, limiting ourselves as the extent of a body, and therefore we experience all these problems. In sleep, we are free of any limitation because we remain just as we are without rising as ego, and therefore we experience no problems. But the only problem with sleep, there's no problem in sleep itself. The problem with sleep is that we come out of it because it's only a temporary state. It's a state of manōlaya, a temporary dissolution of mind. In order to be free of all problems eternally, we need not just manōlaya, which is temporary, but manōnasa, the permanent annihilation of ego. So this is what Bhagavan's teachings are all about. And since ego is a false awareness of ourself, it can be eradicated only by correct awareness of ourself, as I am just I. So that is the first principle of Bhagavan's teaching, is that ego is the root of all problems. And since ego is a false awareness of ourself, it can be destroyed only by correct awareness of ourself. This is what is expressed in classical Advaita by saying that the problem is avidyā, ignorance, and the solution to avidyā is vidyā, knowledge. But the people often trivialize these terms. They don't understand the nature. They think that the nature of the ignorance that is referred to as avidyā or ajnana is this false awareness, I am the body. Because people often if people don't understand the practical import of the teachings of Advaita, they tend to over-philosophize it. So often, for example, a distinction, it is often said that first there has to be ignorance, and then only there can be error. So first we have to be ignorant of what we actually are, and then only we can mistake ourselves to be something else, as if the ignorance and the error were two different things. It's fine when we're analyzing it to consider them to be two different things, but in practice, they're one and the same thing. As Bhagavan made clear, there is no such thing as ignorance other than the false awareness, I am this body. So in practice, they're one and the same. Of course, we can people give illustrations. If it wasn't for the darkness, the dim light, but we wouldn't mistake a rope for a snake. Because of first there had to be the dim light, and then only we can make the error of taking the rope to be a snake. That's fine as far as the analogy is concerned, but it doesn't apply, because there's no such thing as ignorance in terms of self-ignorance, the avidyā. There's no such thing as avidyā other than ego itself, the false awareness, I am this body. This is another thing Bhagavan made very clear. So however much we study scriptures or learn about anything, that is not going to annihilate ego, because that's not the knowledge that can destroy ego has to be a knowledge that is contrary to the nature of ego. The nature of ego is this false awareness, I am this body. However much we study scriptures and so on, or however much deep understanding we have of all this philosophy, who is it who understands all these things? It is me. Who is that me? It is ego. So it's not the knowledge that we are seeking. It's not just a conceptual knowledge. It is the experiential knowledge, the actual awareness of ourself as ourself alone. That's why Bhagavan often used this term, I am I, nan, or aham, aham. Because what we actually are is nothing other than ourself. When we take ourselves to be a body, we are mistaking ourselves to be something other than ourself. Whereas what we actually are is nothing other than ourself. So I am I is the perfect way of describing the experience of self-knowledge. It's not even, sometimes it's described as the experience, aham brahmasmi, I am Brahman. But you've got two things there. You've got I and you've got Brahman. Yes, you're equating them, but why to bring in a second thing? So long as we're ignorant, Brahman is just an idea for us. When we experience ourselves as we actually are, Brahman is nothing but I. So the final experience is, I am I, nothing other than I. And in order to be aware of ourselves as such, we need to investigate ourselves. That is this pure awareness in which we shine as ourself alone. This pure awareness will shine forth and consume ego only when we investigate ourselves in order to know what we actually are, in order to know the source from which we've risen as ego, namely our own being. Therefore, as I said, Bhagavan always takes every opportunity to remind us of these core teachings, and these verses about the import of Naraka Caturdaśī and Dīpāvali illustrate this very well. So I'll now begin to talk about what Murugan recorded in the first two verses 181 and 182. In verse 181, he records what Bhagavan said is, they say that Naranan killed Narakan. Naranan is a Tamil form of the Sanskrit term Narayanan, which is a name of Lord Vishnu. fact, most commonly, Lord Vishnu is referred to as Narayanan. In Sanskrit, Narayana, in Tamil, Narayanan. And in this case, it's referring to Kṛṣṇa, because it was Kṛṣṇa who killed Narakāsura. So it's Narayanan here refers to Narayan, Lord Vishnu, in the form of Kṛṣṇa. And Narakan is as I explained, it's a personal noun, so it's therefore referring to the demon Narakāsura. So that's the first sentence, very simple sentence. Then Bhagavan goes on to explain what is the implied meaning of this story that is told in the Puranas. So what he says in the next sentence is, the one who parades as this hellish body is I. Hellish body is not even, in English we can express it as it's a compound word. Narakūtl means the hellish body. No, well, the hell body. It's a compound noun. So he's describing the body as hell itself. So the one who parades as this hell body is I, namely ego, is Narakan. The one who has killed, having investigated where is Narakan, is that Narayan, Narayanan, who killed Narakan. So the one who has killed implies the one who has killed ego. By investigating where is Narakan, the ego, is that Narayanan who killed Narakan. So this first verse is defining the implication of each of these terms. That is, it's Narayanan who killed Narakan. So who is Narakan? The one who parades as this hell body is I. In other words, ego is Narakan. And the one who has killed the ego, by investigating where is Narakan, that is Narayan. Narayanan. That is Narayanan, yes. And then in the next verse, he explains the significance of the Caturdaśī, the Naraka Caturdaśī Snana. Snana means a bath. It's traditional on the morning of Naraka Caturdaśī to have a bath. Usually it's an oil bath. That is, I don't know how much they do this in North India, but in South India, it's customary, particularly in very hot weather, because it's a way of cooling down the body. Of course, October, November are not such hot months, but still people take oil bath. So an oil bath means you smear oil all over the body, leave it for some time, and then you apply soap nut powder. That is, there's a particular nut called sika. The powder of that sika, the powder of the sika nut, is in English it's called soap nut. It has it doesn't foam like soap, but it cleanses the body like soap, and particularly in combination with the oil. So that's the bath that is taken. So in this verse, Bhagavan, Murugan records Bhagavan's explanation of this bath. That is, bathing in Jnana. Jnana means real awareness, or awareness of what is real. In other words, the real awareness, the pure awareness. Bathing in Jnana, having killed Narakan, by investigate, by is not there, but it's implied, by investigating and reaching the place where Narakan resides, is actually Naraka Caturdaśī Snana, the bath traditionally taken on the morning, but the bath is traditionally taken just before noon, which is a symbol of the conquest of Narakan. That is, Naraka Caturdaśī is a symbol of the conquest of Narakan, and the bath symbolizes, after ego is destroyed, we bathe in the pure waters of I mean, in the waters of pure awareness, that is what that bath symbolizes, the immersion in pure awareness that occurs after ego is destroyed. So these are the first two verses that Muruganar recorded. When Muruganar showed these verses to Bhagavan, he then he summarized these two verses as what is now verse 2 of Upadēśa Taṉippākkaļ. So what Bhagavan says in this verse is, he summarizes what Muruganar says, but adds also a little bit more. He says the verses, Narakudal Nan A Naraku Ulahu Alum Narakan Engu Endru Usai Jnana Tiharial Narakane Kondravan Naranan. So here Bhagavan is saying, who is Naranan? He who killed Narakan with the discus of knowledge, investigating where is Narakan, who reigns over the hell body, who reigns over the hell world, as the hell body is I, is Naranan. Here Bhagavan introduces the idea of the discus of knowledge, which is not there in Muruganar's verses. That is the weapon of Lord Vishnu is the Sudarshana chakra. It's a chakra means a wheel, so it's like a discus. And in so many stories where Vishnu or any of the avatars of Vishnu are concerned, the final weapon he uses to kill the demon is this Sudarshana chakra. So here Bhagavan is saying, when he said the jnana discus, he's implying that what that discus represents is the discus. It's the discus of true knowledge, of pure awareness. That is what destroys all evil. So he who killed Narakan with the discus of knowledge, investigating where is Narakan, who reigns over the hell world as the hell body is I, is Naranan. And then he ends by, that's the first sentence. The next sentence is, Andre Naraka Caturdaśī Nal Dinam Ame. That day is the holy day of Naraka Caturdaśī. So my explanatory paraphrase for that is, he who killed Narakan, the demon Narakāsura, a personification of ego, with the discus of jnana, knowledge in the sense of pure awareness, by investigating where is Narakan, who reigns over the world of Naraka, hell, as this hellish body is I, is Naranan. That is Narayan, Lord Vishnu, in the form of Sri Kṛṣṇa. And that day when he killed him is the holy day of Naraka Caturdaśī, the 14th day of the waning moon between mid-October and mid-November, the day on which Dīpāvali is celebrated in Tamil Nadu. Then the Muruganar also composed verse 183 of Guru Vācaka Kōvai, in which he recorded Bhagavan explaining the meaning of this verse is, be clear that the eternal blazing forth of oneself, the vast, which shines after killing Abhasa, by oneself investigating Narakan, who had degenerated as I, the filthy, as I, who had degenerated, by taking as I, it implies, by taking as I, the filthy Naraka, hell, which is the form of the body, a coalescence of flesh, is what is signified by Dīpāvali. So if we expand that, be clear that the eternal blazing forth of oneself, meaning one's own real nature, or Atma-swarupa, the vast. But let me see, what is it in the verse? I think it must be abādam. That means the vast. Sorry, I can't remember because it's some time since I translated this. So the vast implies the infinite, the great, the supreme or abundant, which shines after killing Abhasa. Abhasa means, Abhasa here refers to Cidābhāsa, which is a term that is usually explained as a reflection of consciousness. But I think it's more appropriate to explain it as a semblance of consciousness. That is, the primary meaning of Abhasa is a semblance. When we look in a mirror and we see our reflection, that reflection is not ourself, it's a semblance, it's a likeness of ourself. So Cidābhāsa means what seems to be chit, but is not really chit, because the real chit, the pure awareness, is just mere awareness, not awareness of this or that. But ego is that awareness that is firstly aware of itself as I am this body, and that is consequently aware of other things. This is not awareness as it actually is. This is so it's referred to as Cidābhāsa, a semblance or a seeming awareness, but it's not the real awareness. The real awareness is only the fundamental awareness I am, not I am this body, or I am knowing this, or I am knowing that. It is just a mere awareness of being, I am. So here Abhasa refers to ego, which is a semblance of real awareness. By oneself investigating Narakan, here Narakan refers to ego, who had degenerated by taking as I the filthy Naraka, the filthy hell, which is the form of the body, a coalescence of flesh, is Dīpāvali. In other words, is what is signified by Dīpāvali. Coming back to this term Abhasa, this is not directly connected with this verse, but just for clarification. As I say, it's often, Cidābhāsa is often referred to as a reflection of awareness, which is okay so long as we don't take it too literally. Because how can awareness be reflected? Physical objects, or it can be reflected, any object, any phenomenon, you can have a reflection of it. But awareness is not, even a light, physical light can be reflected. If light falls on a mirror, it is reflected. But how can awareness be reflected? So it's analogous to a reflection, but it is not literally a reflection. That's another reason why I prefer to translate or to explain Cidābhāsa as meaning a semblance of awareness rather than a reflection. It's okay to consider it as a reflection if we understand that it's a reflection only in the sense that it's analogous to a reflection, but it's not literally a reflection. And of course, there are so many analogies given, like the pure awareness is like the sun, whereas the mind is like the moon, which is a light of the moonlight. Is not, the moon doesn't have any light of its own. It's a reflection of that. So analogies are given, but we need to understand we shouldn't stretch analogies too far. So in terms of analogies, we can consider it to be a reflection, but we shouldn't take the analogies too far. We shouldn't take it to be literally a reflection. It's more appropriate just to consider it to be a likeness of it. It seems to be awareness. it seems to be awareness because it contains the light of pure awareness within it, but because it's mixed and conflated with all these adjuncts, as I am this body and I am knowing all these things, it is not awareness as it actually is. Just like in the snake, there's something real in that snake. The snake is real as a rope. As a snake, it's unreal. Likewise, the ego or mind is not unreal as ego or mind, but it's real as the pure awareness that is its underlying reality. So when Bhagavan saw this verse 183, he then composed the next verse, which is verse B5 in Guru Vācaka Kōvai and verse 3 in Upadēśa Taṉippākkaļ. What he says in this verse is, Naraka uru am nadale udala graham aham. Enave keta narakanam ma paviye nadi maitu tanai olidal Dīpāvali teli. Teli means be clear. So
Michael, before we go there,
Yeah.
because you just talked about the snake rope analogy,
yeah,
there was a question that got posted. I would rather get this thing addressed now rather than later, so it's all
Okay.
connected. So Sadasiva asks, darkness is necessary in order to mistake the rope for snake. Is this not true for Maya versus self-awareness?
The thing with analogies are illustrations, but no analogy is analogous in all respects. So when an analogy is used, we need to take which aspects of the analogy are in what respects it's analogous and in what respects it is not analogous. In the case of a rope and the snake, you've got so many things there. It's not the rope that is seeing itself as a snake. There's an observer, and that observer is not seeing the rope clearly, so because of the dim light, and so the observer mistakes the rope to be a snake. But all these things don't apply in the case of ego, because ego mistakes itself to be something other than what it actually is. But there's no such thing as ego other than this mistaken awareness, I am this body. So we can't match every aspect of the snake or rope analogy to the case of ego. We have to understand what we need to take, and that we need to understand in what respects it's analogous and take that alone. And that's why I said people often say, you say this, but first you have to have darkness before you can make the error of taking a rope to be a snake. Therefore, they think there are two things. There's ignorance and there's the mistaken awareness. But Bhagavan made it very clear, but there's no such thing as ignorance other than ego, which is that mistaken awareness. So sometimes we shouldn't extrapolate analogies too far. Otherwise, analogies are there to serve a purpose. So whenever an analogy is used, we need to understand in what sense it is analogous. Otherwise, if we take analogies too far, we are just creating confusion. So that's why manana is very important. We need to think clearly about these things, consider it from many different angles in order to understand why this analogy is used, what is being pointed out by this analogy, and not to take the analogy too far. Is that a clear answer to that question?
So,
Well, it is But the question came from what you just said about needing to look into these deeply, look into what the analogy means. That's what posed the question.
Yeah.
But thank you anyway. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah. We just need to be, analogies are very useful, provided that we don't stretch them too far.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. So along those same lines, I'm going to have Angelica ask the question on the same topic. Go ahead, Angelica.
Hi, thank you so much. Michael and everybody, please bear with me. My English is not very good, and on top of it, I'm not very good at explaining.
No worries. Don't worry at all. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna try.
Yeah.
I just want your answer, Michael, please. I see the more and more I go into the heart and situations that happen in the apparent snake, I see that there's like two kind of dimensions, or two kind of like not real there's no meaning, right? But it seems that there's two sides of the snake, because, for example, we can see like wars, and the person, a politician, is thinking, I'm gonna do this for my own benefit and I'm gonna extract this. But in the other side, there's a side where, when this apparent bad, there's no bad, but the apparently bad things are happening, there is a side that is actually the true meaning, that what this politician, for example, will be doing, he is adopting the idea, I am doing it because I want to extract this. But the real reason that he's been making to do something, is coming from a deeper level. Like, it's actually, there's a reason that this is happening. So whoever is paying their karmas and everything is being brought back to the heart, to the, like, it's just a part of the evolution of that. And it's kind of like, that's the only way that you can actually go back. And, is that right, Michael?
I think I understand what you're pointing at. That is what you said. What it brings to my mind is what Bhagavan says in the 19th paragraph of Nana. There are not two minds, a good mind and a bad mind. In other words, minds are not of two kinds, good or bad. Mind is only one. The vasanas are of two kinds, the subha vasanas and the asubha vasanas. Subha means the good, agreeable vasanas. Asubha means the disagreeable vasanas. So when the mind is under the sway of subha vasanas, we call it a good mind. When it's under the sway of asubha vasanas, we call it a bad mind. However bad others may appear to be, disliking them is not it's not proper to dislike them. Both likes and dislikes are both to be disliked. This is a very, very important teaching. When we see the world, we see all sorts of very, very terrible things are being done. The things that people do to each other, it's mind-boggling when we see the cruelty, deliberate cruelty that is done in this world. So, but what Bhagavan is telling us, that is in the heart of every living being, even the cruelest type of person, in their heart is that pure light. But it's because of the cloud of vasanas that are obscuring that light, that they do all sorts of bad things. So in a sense, we have to feel sorry for the evil people. Why they are evil, why they're doing wicked, cruel things, it is because of their ignorance is so dense. They're so densely covered with vasanas. There's a beautiful saying, my mother often used to say this, but it's a well-known saying, but I think it's a very nice saying we should often apply. That is, there but for the grace of God go I. That is, if we see evil being done, and we feel, I wouldn't do something like that. I mean, naturally, we all feel, when we see any good person, when they see something evil, they feel, that's not something I could ever do. But why don't we do all those bad things that other people are doing? It's only by the grace of God. We need to be very, very humble. We shouldn't, it's very easy to sit in judgment on others and to condemn what others do. Yes, if someone does something bad, the action needs to be condemned. It needs to be said, this is unacceptable. That bad people shouldn't be allowed to do bad things. If someone is doing bad things, they need to be restrained by the law and punished and so on and so forth. All that is appropriate. But at the same time, we need to feel sympathy for them, because the evil people are not so different to us. It's just their vasanas are stronger and more clouding their mind more. So if at all we have the clarity to understand this is not good, we should not do this, that clarity is given only by Bhagavan's grace. So we should always be very humble. Right? I mean, sometimes we can't avoid judging people. If someone does something very bad, we can't avoid judging them. But we need to be very humble in our judgment. We need to, sometimes it is said, you should hate the sin, not the sinner. That is, it's the bad actions we should hate. The sinner we should feel sorry for. Why they are sinning? Because of the density of their ignorance. That is, when the mind is much clouded with vasanas, then there's selfishness, cruelty, and all these things. And the root of all those vasanas is ego. And the same ego that we see in them, that same ego is in us. Just by Bhagavan's grace, our ego has been a little bit exposed to us, and the worst of our vasanas have been cleared off by his grace. And the same grace that has brought us to where we are now, that same grace is working in the heart of everyone. So every great saint was once a sinner, and every great sinner will one day be a saint. I mean, not literally, but I mean, what I mean is we're all going through a process of purification. The culmination of this process of purification is the eradication of the root impurity, namely ego. So we're all on a journey. The wicked people, the evil people, are as much on a spiritual journey as we are. We just happen to be a little bit more aware that we're on a spiritual journey, and that we have obligations to ourselves to try to follow this path of self-investigation and self-surrender that Bhagavan has taught us. Others are not so aware of this. That's the only difference. They're not so aware because their minds are more clouded with vasanas. I don't know whether that is addressing what you were saying, but is that an appropriate answer, or was it something more that you were saying?
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, it's basically that, but I guess I think you answered everything, but I guess my point was that there's always two sides of the coin, that whatever seems to be bad is actually a good thing. Everything is for good at the end, right? So it has the double meaning, right?
In that same 19th paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan says later on, it is not appropriate to let the mind dwell excessively on worldly matters. Because if we begin reading the news and hearing all the terrible, terrible things that are happening in the world, I mean, terrible things have been happening in the world since time immemorial, because this is all just a play of vasanas, ultimately. But yes, oh, and another thing Bhagavan often said, it's not in Nana, but Bhagavan often used to say, when people came and lamented about the condition of the world and said they wanted to reform the world. I mean, one of the big injustices in Bhagavan, of course, there were so many other injustices, but from an Indian perspective, one of the greatest injustices was throughout most of Bhagavan's life, India was under foreign rule, colonial rule, British rule. That is obviously unjust because the British were exploiting India in so many ways for their own gain. So there were so many injustices in any type of empire, any type of colonial rule. There will inevitably be injustices because why one country colonized it's another it's to exploit it in one way or another. So this was an injustice that many people in India in those days were acutely aware of. So people often came to Bhagavan talking about this or about other injustices in the world, but sometimes people came and talked about the injustices of the caste system or this or that. So I mean, the world is always full of so many injustices. So when people used to come to Bhagavan and talk about these things and say, I want to reform this, Bhagavan used to say, he who has created this world knows how to take care of it. Leave it to him. Why Bhagavan said that? Is it because Bhagavan is not concerned about these injustices? No, that would be a misreading. Bhagavan understands the root cause of all these injustices. Ultimately, the root cause of all injustices, all evil, everything that's bad, is ego. Even everything that is in our mind good, because good and bad are just relative terms. The ultimate good, according to Bhagavan, is the annihilation of ego. Because ego is the source of all pain, all suffering, everything. It's all ultimately caused by ego. So we can't change. We may be distressed to see the condition of the world, but what can we do to change it? Even if we try and fight for justice and everything, people have been trying to reform this world, reform society, reform governments. People have been fighting for justice for millennia. Ever since there's such a thing as human society, from the most simple forms of human society up to today's very, very complex society where basically the whole world is one society because what is done here will affect there. And even if we try to rectify these things, we can see from history when one problem is rectified, another problem crops up. So the world is never a perfect place. So we should understand that the root cause of all these things is ego. So our focus should be on removing the ego in us, because that is the root of all evil. And if we want to put an end to all evil, we need to put an end to ego, the root of all evil. That's why Bhagavan didn't encourage anyone to, of course, he didn't discourage. There are many Gandhians, for example, used to come to Bhagavan, people who were very close to Gandhi. And Bhagavan didn't discourage them from doing what they're doing. But even to them, he would remind them, do whatever you think is right, but leave the result. Basically, he said what Kṛṣṇa said to Arjuna in the Gita. Fight for what is, if you consider something is right, fight for it, but don't be attached to the results. You have the right to the action, not to the result thereof. So even if we're engaged in worldly activities, we need to do it it needs to be done as nishkamya karma. We shouldn't be attached to the results. We do what we think is right. We try to do what we think is right. Whether our efforts fructify or not, that is in the hands of Bhagavan. We should leave it to him. But if we're really intent on following this path, we should leave the world. Bhagavan knows how to take care of this world. Leave it to him. We need to try to surrender ourselves to him.
That's it, Michael.
Thank you,
Thank you
Michael.
so much. Thank you.
That is why Bhagavan's teachings are all focused on this one root problem, ego, and how to annihilate it.
Right.
That's why
Thank
he's
you,
talking about that in these verses. That's what these verses are all about.
Right.
There's Narakan.
Exactly.
It is nothing but ego personified as a demon.
Kumar,
Michael, you
I
were
have
explaining.
one-
One second, Ram. So I got to let Michael finish this verse. He's got to finish it, and then we'll get to you. He'll be the first. Is that okay? So, Michael, please, can you go ahead and finish
Yes.
that verse?
So,
Sorry, mainly because of the rope snake analogy, I just wanted to get that over with at that point.
Right.
You already discussed the second verse, but you were going to explain it. So
I was beginning to explain it. That is often when to translate a Tamil verse into English, we have to start from the end. So the final clause of this verse is what we have to take as the beginning in English. Tānai olidal Dīpāvali. Shining as oneself is Dīpāvali. That's a main clause. And how do we shine as ourself? Shining as ourself implies being as we actually are without rising as ego. So how can we be as we actually are without rising as ego? Maitu means killing. How do we kill? Obviously killing ego. How do we kill that ego? Narakan Amāvāsyā, the great sinner who is Narakan. In other words, he's referring to ego here. So we kill this ego by investigating it. Nadi means investigating. And he refers to him as Keta, Keta in this case, it means who has degenerated, a very degenerate Narakan. How was he degenerated? He was degenerated by as the illusory body abode, which is the form of hell, is I. Naraka udalam nadale udal graham aham. Udala graham means the body abode, the body home. We're taking this body as our abode, and this is nadale. I think nadale means what is nadale? I'm just trying to remember. It's cunning, deception, illusion, pretense, suffering, distress. So this illusory or miserable body abode, which is Naraka Udal. Naraka Uru, the form of hell. So this Bhagavan refers to this body as hell. Taking this body as I is it's how we have degenerated, how we have seemingly ceased to be the infinite pure awareness that we actually are, the Swarupa, and we've degenerated as this ego. So when this ego is destroyed, we shine as ourself, and that shining of ourself, shining as ourself means shining as Atma-Swarupa, what we actually are. Having investigated and killed the great sinner who is Narakan, who had degenerated as the illusory or miserable body abode, which is the form of hell, is I. Taking that body to be I is what is signified by Dīpāvali. He doesn't say what is signified, he said that is Dīpāvali. That implies it's what's signified by Dīpāvali. So the lights that are lit on Dīpāvali symbolize the shining forth of ourself as we actually are, as Atma-swarupa.
Verse 3 is a bit less cultural and more clear.
Yes.
In the sense, like, he goes a bit more direct there.
Yeah.
Well,
in both of the verses, Bhagavan is referring to the practice of, he refers to self-investigation of both of them. So we can kill this ego only by self-investigation. When the ego is killed, we shine forth as ourself. That shining forth of ourself is what is represented by Dīpāvali. Yeah.
So what I found is the word degeneration is pretty strong. Is something, it is when a baby is born or it's growing up, it's not voluntarily trying to grasp, right? It happens.
No, it doesn't just happen. Why? It's ego. Bhagavan says, urupatri undam, urupatri nekam. Grasping form, it comes into being. Grasping form, it's that grasping nature of ego. It's the very ego has no existence whatsoever, independent of this grasping. Without grasping a form, there's no such thing as ego at all. That's why he says, urupatri unda means grasping form, it comes into being. It doesn't exist at all, independent of this grasping.
Right. So just that, he's making a really strong, using strong words here.
But Bhagavan doesn't mince his words. He's very
exactly
plain.
Right.
Michael, doesn't he also say, with regard to degeneration, what Kumar just said, doesn't he also say, somewhere else that, self-investigation is like, going against the current, because our natural instinct is to be, egotistic, to be completely embodied in the cell, in the body and all of that.
Yeah.
So we're really going against the current. What is that verse, going against the current? What is specifically was that verse?
I don't know if there's any particular verse, but that's something I often say like that. That is, the nature of ego is grasping form. Self-investigation is grasping our being, which is the very opposite. Because when we grasp our being, because our being means the fundamental awareness of being, I am. This is not a form. So when we grasp that, we've got nothing other than ourselves to hold on to. So we as ego subside back into our being. By grasping form, we rise. By grasping our being, we subside.
But this very action is going against all our natural instincts or all of conformity of nature
It is contrary to the nature of ego, but it is not contrary to our nature.
Yes.
We need to understand our nature is just to be and to shine as we always actually are.
But actually, since we enjoy being as we actually are, as we proceed with the path, we actually find that this becomes something that we choose to do rather than choose to be in the world.
That is, by Bhagavan's grace, our mind is purified more. The more it's purified, the more clarity it gets, and the more attraction the more we are attracted to just being rather than rising. But when the mind is very, very clouded by dense vasanas, there's no attraction, there's no appeal that is subsiding, doesn't appeal at all. So we rush outwards trying to get this or that. So it's only by grace that all this happens.
So grace, in fact, as you later once said in Bhagavan's verse, is both the pulling within as well, drawing within as well as the
Bhagavan
pushing out
often
of the
used to
world,
say
right?
that
Yes.
grace from outside, it pushes within. That is all
Yes.
that we experience in our life. We all experience so many difficulties. If we take these, if we understand these correctly, these are all pushing us back within. Because where is the only refuge? Where the only place we can seek refuge from this world? Even if we go climb the Himalayas and sit in a cave there, that's not refuge because our mind comes with us. The only real refuge, the only place of safety, true safety, eternal safety, is our own heart.
And the Narakāsura that we talk about is our own damn ego. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
our
yeah.
own
Not,
wretched ego.
it,
Naraka doesn't
even,
exist outside of us. Yeah.
yeah, even to say our ego is a bit, I mean, this is a problem. We are trying to talk about these things using language which is not designed for these things. Because to say our ego is 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 a but then there are two things there. There's us and our ego. But we are nothing. That is, we who are struggling on this spiritual path are nothing but ego. It's, rather than saying our ego, that's why I often say us as ego or ourself as ego, we as ego, because it's not what we actually are, but it's what we experience ourselves to be now.
Yeah.
What we seem to be here.
And deep Oli should be in Oli is within us. Our light shines all the time, eternally, endlessly. Indivisible,
Yeah.
endless, and Satchitananda is always
How
there.
we
So
know all this? It's only by
yeah,
that light of awareness
exactly,
that is ever shining in
exactly.
our heart.
That's what
That
keeps us
light of
sane. Yeah,
awareness alone is what is real.
yeah.
Everything else is just a mere shadow play.
And this is the medicine that Bhagavan talks about, the Mala Marunda. I mean, when
This
you
is
recognize
yeah.
this, then you come to this, then suddenly you feel you've got the right medicine to deal with the world, You've got the
Exactly.
right to deal with the ego. I mean, not the world
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
world is only one's
Deal
own
with
Naraka
the
ego.
only way to deal with the world is to deal with ego. Because
Yes,
it's only for ego that the world is a problem.
exactly.
It's
Yeah.
only ego that has likes and dislikes. Oh, this is bad, this is good. Oh, this is
Yeah.
all a creation of ego. Put an end to ego, we put an end to all problems,
Exactly. Thank you.
including
Thank
the
you.
world itself.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. So, at the right me, let me go to Ram. He's been waiting. Ram.
Hey, Michael, good morning, sir. Well, the reasoning behind this analogy of snake is that snake itself is perceived incorrectly, but there is an underlying reality that we need to realize. Is that the significance of that analogy? Is that how it needs to be taken?
That is certainly one important, I mean, it's not just that, but that's the main point. But there is a reality. The problem is that we are not seeing that reality as it is. What is that reality? Tattvamasi, you are that. Now we are experiencing ourselves. We experience ourselves as I am this body. And as a consequence of experiencing ourselves as I am this body, we experience ourselves as I am knowing this, I am experiencing that, and so on and so forth. What is real in all these things is only that I. Not the body, not the world, not anything. Only I is real. But all this multiplicity seems to be real when he rises ego and take this body to be I. So that's why it's often said the rope is unreal. Sorry, the snake is unreal as a snake. It is real as a rope. Likewise, we are unreal as ego. We are real as Brahman, real as Atma-vichara, what we actually are. That's it.
In other words, the very fact that we are able to sense the ego tells that there is an underlying reality beneath that is making it happen. So that is what we need to be focused on.
Yes,
is that right?
That is, ego is an adjunct conflated awareness. What is real in ego is just the mere awareness I am. What is unreal is what this I am is conflated with, namely all the adjunct, this body and so on.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Michael. So Melissa, next question to Melissa.
Yes, Michael, I appreciate that words are only metaphors. We're only trying to point to what is completely a mystery and wordless. But nonetheless, this is what we have to work with. When you use the term grasping, I recognize that that's a metaphor because, after all, there are no hands or arms that we're referring to here. Ego has no hands and no arms.
Yes.
It doesn't grasp in that respect, and it doesn't even have understanding, so it doesn't grasp in that respect either. But so when I hear the word grasping, I substitute conditioning, because it does seem, and again I use that as a metaphor, it does seem that what the process that seems to happen is that the more that the mind attends to the body, the mind becomes conditioned to identifying with the body. And in that sense, more and more it grasps an individuality or individuation, and in that way separates or believes, it comes to believe more and more that it is a separate, that the body mind is separate from the infinite whole that is truly all there is. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I would explain it slightly differently. Grasping, I understand grasping as we grasp in our awareness. We grasp things by being aware of them. And we also need to be very, that is, we shouldn't take Bhagavan's teachings in isolation. We shouldn't take particular teachings in isolation. It's in verse 25 that Bhagavan says, grasping form it comes into being, grasping form it stands, grasping and feeding on forms it flourishes abundantly. So when he says grasping form it comes into being, it will be very easy if we take that in isolation to believe that there's a body out there, ego rises and grasps it. But he makes it very clear in the next verse where he says, if ego comes into being, everything comes into being. If ego doesn't exist, if ego is not, everything is not. So that means that grasping form entails projecting and grasping. But that projecting and we say projecting and grasping as if they're two things. Actually, they're one and the same thing, because where is this body and world projected? It's projected in our own awareness, in that awareness that we sometimes refer to as mind. So it's, and our being aware of these things is so the projecting and the grasping are one and the same thing. We're projecting and being aware of it is one and the same thing. So all that Bhagavan compacts into this term grasping. The term the verb Bhagavan uses, well, a participle, is patri, which is a form of the verb patru. Patru means to grasp, seize, catch, hold on to, attach to. So it's very much that idea of grasping, of holding, of catching. But how we do that is by being aware of these things. So attention is nothing but a focusing of our awareness. So when we attend to a particular thing, we're holding it more tightly. Anything that appears in our awareness, we're already holding it, but we're not holding it tightly. But we hold tightly onto those things we focus on. That's the attention. So that same attention that is now holding on to external things, we need to redirect back within to hold on to ourselves. Conditioning is a result of this grasping. That is, conditioning. All phenomena exist only because we grasp them. So conditioning is one among the many phenomena that exist only because we grasp them, because we hold them in our awareness. We accommodate them in our awareness, we could say. So how do we need to deny accommodation? As Bhagavan says in the first sentence of the 13th paragraph, not giving even the slightest room to the rising of any thought other than thought of oneself. So we shouldn't allow our attention to go towards any thought there. But when Bhagavan talks about thought, he uses the term thought in a very broad sense to mean any type of mental impression, mental phenomenon is a thought. So we give room to the rising to these things by accommodating them in our awareness. So how can we deny them that accommodation? How can we deny them room? Only by focusing our entire attention on ourselves. That focusing of our attention on ourselves is what he refers to in that sentence as Atma-chintana, thought of oneself. So he says, Amma-chintane tavira vera-chintane kalambavatu satram idam kodamo, not giving even the slightest room to rising to not giving even the slightest room to the rising of any thought other than thought of oneself. In other words, other than self-attentiveness. So we give rise to these things, we give room for these things to arise by allowing our mind to go away from ourselves. If we focus our whole attention, our whole awareness on ourself alone, then there's no room for anything else to arise. But as soon as we lose our hold on ourself, on our own being, we accommodate all these things.
Michael, the process is very clear to me, though finding the words to describe it can be tricky.
It is tricky, but because we think in terms of words, trying to think, that's why manana is very important, because manana helps to clarify. Manana by itself is insufficient. Manana is, first we hear Bhagavan's teachings, then we try to think deeply about them, make sense of them, not only make sense of them, make them our own. That is what the process of manana is about. But that is only, both Sravana and manana serve one purpose and one purpose alone. That is the actual practice, and the dhyāna, the actual turning of our attention to ourselves. But without a clear understanding, we won't even understand what it means to turn our attention back towards ourselves. That is why manana is considered so important.
Yes,
There's
Michael,
a Sanskrit term muni, which means sage. The etymology of muni is one who is skilled in manana.
This is very clear. The point that I'm putting my attention to, where there is just a slight confusion, perhaps, or unclarity, is right at that point where there is initially the projection, the very seed of the projection that comes from what we're calling ego. At that very singular point of projection, then like as you're pointing out, it's a single process, that there is projection and there is then the grasping. So the conditioning is, and then it becomes a positive feedback, because of course the more that it grasps, then the stronger the conditioning becomes.
Yes.
And one could say that, for example, in a newborn baby, so the theory is that the newborn baby doesn't yet differentiate itself, a sense of self, a body mind. There is no body mind differentiated yet. But that because the body is the most consistent aspect of its experience, that body then becomes increasingly conditioned to be identified with the mind. And then of course that becomes, there's a feedback, and as the infant, this happens immediately, that conditioning becomes stronger and stronger. And then, we come to believe we're an individual. But it's that the very seed of the process So that's where I mean, it doesn't trouble me very much, quite honestly, because I certainly see that now at this point, the attending to one's true self, the awareness, beingness, the more that one attends to that, then there is a reconditioning, and the ego self drops off. It increasingly drops away, and only the Sat Chit is recognized more and more fully as being all there is. So it's very clear that a turning point, when the teaching arrives, a turning point has occurred, and then it's a matter of taking the turn and increasingly, allowing that to be the new, if you will, it's a rebirth. It's a dying of the old self, and a new self is born.
Exactly. That's what it's all about. We need to be reborn as we actually are.
Yes. Okay.
What you say about conditioning, in a sense, this is we can, in a certain sense, say the vasanas are conditioning, but the conditioning isn't coming from outside. We have these are the conditioning that we have created, not just now, but over the course of so many lives.
Yes.
In this context, what you were saying about a newborn baby, many psychologists believe that a newborn baby has no ego, that ego forms over time. They believe that because they are viewing from outside. But Bhagavan is very, very clear. Ego is there from the start, because ego is that I, but there's no such thing as awareness of phenomena without ego, because ego is the subject. All the phenomena are objects. So from the very moment when the baby becomes aware of itself as this little form dependent on the mother and all these things, there's already a separation between I and all the things I need. I need the milk, I need this, I need that. The first thing the baby needs when it comes out of the womb, first thing it needs is to breathe. And babies often don't breathe, which is why often they're given a smack on the bottom to give them the shock to make them start breathing. So it's from the very moment of birth, well, before birth, we're totally dependent on the mother. I mean, obviously in the womb, a child is totally dependent on the mother for everything, for the oxygen and everything, because it's coming from the mother's bloodstream. Once the child comes out into the world, from that moment onwards, they begin to become independent. First, they need to breathe themselves. They need to feed themselves. They need to get the milk from a mother. No longer it's automatically coming. So that's the whole process. But the ego is there from the very start. Once someone asked Bhagavan, why is it that we find young children, innocent children, why is it we find them so attractive? Attractive, he's not meaning in any bad way, but attractive. There's something so appealing about the innocence of children. We're naturally charmed when we see small children.
Yes.
So someone asked Bhagavan, why is that? Bhagavan said, because they haven't yet sprouted their horns.
Yes, right.
Their vasanas have not yet fully blossomed, but they begin to sprout those horns very, very small. If you see in kindergarten, small children, even before they're ready to go to school, you see some children begin to dominate others, some begin to bully, some begin to assert themselves, some are very shy. All these personal things, they begin to sprout very, very quickly.
Yes, thank you. Michael, thank you for that quote from Ramana. They haven't yet sprouted their horns. But
Bhagavan has a way of putting things so simply and so beautifully.
Yes, that metaphor is very clear. But it just occurred to me as you were explaining this that, and again, this is just my mind, doing its thing. But it occurs to me that at the moment when the placenta is cut, that at that moment there is the quote unquote the separation from that what had been there had been no so to speak separation yet, that this quote unquote organism was fully still it was receiving everything from the infinite. And then at the moment that cut is made, then everything must begin that individuation, starting with breathing, starting with taking the breath. And that first breath, the center of the breath is in the middle of the chest, right at the place that Bhagavan points to as the heart.
Exactly.
So that it's at that moment when the first breath comes in, the individuation at that moment it begins. One could say. Anyway, just rambling thoughts.
In the
but
interest
thank
of
you.
time, no problem. In the interest of time, I would like to go to the next question. Thanks, Melissa. So There's a question from Dipti. I have no room for any more questions because I got 3 pending. Please bear with us. You can always ask next time. Dipti asks, hello, Michael. I have a question. If there is negativity from friends or family members, is it okay or appropriate to stay away from them to maintain my peace? My mind is going in vigorous thoughts whenever I get in contact with these people, and my inner sense doesn't want to be in that zone. I'm made to feel guilty for staying away by these people, but in my inner sense, I feel this is the right thing to do. Some people say if you are being away, you're not going in the right path spiritually, as they say. You're being triggered by negativity, meaning your ego is active. I feel this is as a foul play by the people to keep me in the loop of their negativity. My question is, can I follow what my heart says to stay away from these negativity? I feel Bhagavan is taking care of this as well. Please let me know your thoughts.
Yeah, Bhagavan never gave any clear guidance about what we should or should not do, because what Bhagavan made clear, everything happens in accordance with prarabdha. That does not mean all our actions are in accordance with prarabdha. Prarabdha is the fruit of our past actions. So it is what we are given to experience. So things are happening according to prarabdha. But it seems to us that we seem to have some responsibility, both to ourselves and to others. So we need to, we're often faced with situations where we need to make decisions, whether to avoid association with people or to allow it, to what extent to allow it. All these things, we're faced with these decisions. We should, as you say, we should follow our heart. We should do what seems to us to be the correct and appropriate thing to do. But we should do it with an attitude of detachment, because sometimes we make a decision to do a certain thing and something or other will override our decision. So this is why, as Kṛṣṇa says in the Gita, you have the right to the action, not to the fruit thereof. So if you think it is better to avoid people, and I fully sympathize with that, because people, worldly people, very easily suck us into their way of their gossiping and all this way of talking about things. So we have a responsibility to ourselves to avoid getting sucked into these things. So we try to minimize, we don't totally cut off people, but we try to minimize the involvement with people. That's not wrong. But if it is your destiny to have involvement with these people, whatever decision you make, whatever effort you make, it will be overridden by circumstances. If that is the case, you accept it as Bhagavan's will. Was that, Dipti, is that a clear answer?
Yes, Michael, it's a clear answer. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So just going to go to, there's a couple of questions which were sent to me before even our session started from Sanjay.
Before Sanjay's question, the earlier one was the question you sent a couple of weeks ago from someone called Orsay about the demon. The question is, since a long time, I'm trying to grasp the deep meaning of Ulladu verses. Every time I read a verse or listen to Sri Michael James, there's another perspective opening up. For a long time, I was trying to understand what Master Sri Ramana Maharshi meant by formless demon ego in verse 25 of Ulladu. In ancient Greece, a daemon was primarily understood as a formless, benevolent, or morally neutral spirit guide that acted as a bridge between the mortal realm and the high gods. In this sense, can we describe it as the I thought eventually guiding its or our path towards our or its source? What Orsay says here is correct, but in ancient Greek, that is the English word demon and the equivalent word in many other European languages derives from a Greek word, daemon. And daemons were not malevolent spirits. However, demon changed its meaning. How it changed its meaning, it was from mostly from the early Christian period, because when Christianity was spreading in Europe, there were so many different religions. There was the Greek gods, there were the Roman gods, there were the God of the Jews, there was influence of, I mean, not directly in the Roman Empire, but it was a very early influence on Christianity was the Zoroastrian religion of Persia. They had this duality of good and evil, a god and an evil spirit. I think that, but is very much there in all the Semitic religions. I don't know to what extent it's there. I think it's there even in Judaism. It's certainly there in Christianity and Islam. This originates from, I believe it originates from Persia. But anyway, that aside, because the Christians were up against so many different gods, the daemons, who, as you say, they were sort of lesser spirits, but not evil at all. They were links to the high gods or whatever. According to Christianity, they're all depicted as malevolent because they want to assert that their God is the only God and that any other God is therefore a demon. So this is how the word daemon, which was in Greek didn't denote a malevolent force, it denoted generally a benevolent force, took on a different meaning and came to mean malevolent. So in modern English, demon means something malevolent. Even if we use the word demon metaphorically, we sometimes talk about a person dealing with their demons, meaning dealing with all their bad tendencies, or whatever. So demon in modern English and most modern European languages means a malevolent spirit. Coming back to Bhagavan, but the term Bhagavan used, it's a Tamil term, pay. Pay is a Tamil equivalent to a Sanskrit term, pisacha. A pisacha is is definitely a malevolent spirit. They're said to inhabit the burial grounds and cremation grounds. They're said to feed on the flesh of decaying bodies. They're sometimes said to possess bodies. So it's this idea of a malevolent spirit possessing something, but Bhagavan used this term, pay, which I've translated as demon because we don't have exact terms. The pay is a bit like there's a word in English, ghoul. Ghoul comes, I believe it comes from it's a term of Arabic origin, because in Arabic mythology, there were creatures very similar to pisachas. They were also flesh-eating, demonic creatures. So it's that sort of idea. To illustrate wait a second, I made a note of it somewhere. That is to illustrate what Bhagavan means by the term pay, which, as I say, is the one I've translated as a demon. he uses this term in verse 167 of Guru Vācaka Kōvai. And the meaning of this verse is roughly, bound by complete delusion, the ego life undertaken by all sentient beings in the three worlds is nothing other than a dance of demons, goals, we can say, possessing corpses placed on pyres in a cremation ground. So before the body, I mean, the idea is that a body is placed on the pyre in the cremation ground, but before the body is burnt, it's possessed by a demon, it gets up and it starts dancing around. Bhagavan says the ego life lived by all sentient beings. That's all human beings, all cats, dogs, cows, elephants, all sentient beings, not only in this world, in all three worlds. That means in the higher world and in the lower worlds. Even the devas, the minor gods in heaven, and all the demons in hell, all are nothing but a dance of these demons who possess corpses in the cremation ground. So it is definitely, it has a malevolent connotation. So because ego, so to speak, has possessed us. Of course, we who are possessed by ego are ego ourselves, but that is, we as ego have taken possession of this body and are dancing around trying to fulfill our desires, fighting with others, fighting wars and fighting in politics, fighting in academia, fighting in business, fighting with that. It's all nothing but all this struggle for survival, this struggle for asserting ourselves, accumulating wealth or accumulating this or that, or it's all, the whole thing is nothing but, in Bhagavan's view, it's nothing but a dance of these demons who've possessed bodies in a cremation ground. So
right. That goes in with these verses too. I mean, saying that discussion goes in with our verses that we're discussing today also. The demon.
Naraka, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It was a very, when I saw it, I thought it's a very appropriate question.
It's an appropriate question.
Verses, because,
right. So with that, I want to conclude with Sanjay's questions. So basically he wants...
Can I just say one more thing on this? Sorry.
Yeah.
There's another verse in Guru Vācaka Kōvai, I can't remember now the verse number, in which Bhagavan says, in the Puranas, that's in the mythology, there's so many... I mean, any mythology in any culture, if you see, they're all stories about the battle between good and evil, light and darkness, and so on. So Bhagavan says all this, the Devasura Yuddha, the warfare between the gods and the demons, depicted in the Puranas, it's all, I can't remember exactly how it is, but basically the idea is this is all the battle going on in the heart of every spiritual aspirant between our better inclinations and our worse inclinations. So in the mind of a spiritual aspirant, when we come to the path of self-investigation, we're trying to turn our mind within and thereby surrender it to Bhagavan. That creates a battle between, on the one hand, satvasana, which is the liking just to subside and be as we actually are, subside back into our being by holding on to our being, and the Vishaya vasanas, the liking to hold on to all the external Vishayas, the objects and phenomena. So this battle is going on in the heart of all of us. So this is what is depicted in the Puranas as the battle between the devas and the asuras, the gods and the demons.
Yeah.
Show us the warfare of grace.
Right.
Yeah. Bhagavan alludes to that also in Akram Life, where he says, show the warfare of grace.
Oh yeah, it's verse 396 of Guru Vācaka Kōvai.
Oh, okay, right. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So yeah, let's go to Sanjay's question now. He wants to. There's one song that Sadhu Om composed, which actually is a single verse. He captures beautifully, about the nature of Bhagavan, about our surrender and so forth. So, and that is Aru Uru Amaindu. So I don't know, Michael, I'm sure you can sing it. So if you want to go ahead and sing that verse and explain it, please. Aru Uru Amaindu.
Aru Uru Amaindu, Jnana Aruluru, Nayana Mendi, Porledu Venopondaku, Pukkaha Mahi Amba, Maruluru Mayakum Nikum Maha Guru Ramlamurti, Tiruvadi Kannil Otri Chintail Dhyanam Sevam. This is a dhyāna verse, that is a verse of meditation on Bhagavan. And again, as I said earlier in connection with some other verse, often in Tamil, if we to give the meaning of a verse in English, we have to start from the end. So the final line is, or the final line and a half is, Mahaguru Ramana Murti, Tiruvadi Kannil Otri Chintail Dhyanam Sevam. So let us do meditation, or let us meditate upon. Chintail means in the heart, or in the heart. Chinte means mind, but it means mind in a somewhat deeper sense. So we can say in the mind or in the heart. Tiruvadi Kannil Otri, touching his holy feet with our eyes. Obviously, this is meditation, so we're not physically touching his holy feet with our eyes, but mentally we are touching his feet on our eyes. Whose feet? Whose Tiruvadi? Tiruvadi means holy feet or sacred feet. Mahaguru Ramana Murti. That is the feet of this great Guru Ramana. Ramana Murti means Murti is a term that means form, of the outward form of a god or guru. So Ramana Murti is referring to the form of Bhagavan as the great Guru. So that's the main idea, where let us meditate in the heart on the great Guru Ramana Murti, touching his holy feet on our eyes. So, and then everything before that is a description of Mahaguru Ramana Murti. So, if we can go back to the beginning now. So, Aru Vuru Amainda, Aru means formless, Uru means form, Amaindu. So, assuming the formless, assuming the form. That is, Bhagavan is the formless reality, but has assumed form, assumed a human form. Jnana Arul Iru Nayana Mendi, having jnana and grace as his two eyes. It's a beautiful description. So jnana and grace, they're his two eyes. Porul Edu Ena Pondaku Pukumahi Amba Marulurum Mayakum Nikum, who dispels the delusion of ignorance of his devotees. Oh, actually before that, the Porledu Ena Pondaku Pukum Ahi, being a refuge to those who come seeking what is the reality, seeking to know what is the reality. So he's the formless who has assumed form, implying human form. He has taking jnana and grace as his two eyes, being a refuge to those who come desiring to know the reality. He dispels the delusion of ignorance of his devotees. So it's a beautiful, beautiful description of Bhagavan. What is Bhagavan? He is that formless who has taken human form. He has his two eyes are jnana and grace. His jnana and his grace. He's the refuge for those who seek to know what is real. What is Porul means substance, in the sense of what is the ultimate substance, what is the underlying reality of all this appearance, what is all this, and he dispels the delusion of those who come seeking to know what is the reality. So let us meditate on let us meditate on him in our heart, touching his holy feet to our eyes.
Sir, why does it talk about Murti here? The word Maha Guru Ramana Murti.
Because Bhagavan is a form, isn't he? But when we talk about Bhagavan, what Bhagavan actually is the formless. At the very first word of a verse, he emphasizes that what Bhagavan actually is Aru. Aru means what is formless. Aru is the opposite of Uru. But the formless has taken form. So as this human form in which he appeared, that human form is what is referred to as Murti.
But sir, Sadhu Om says here, let us meditate in the heart upon Mahaguru Ramana Murti. So he is saying that you meditate in the heart on a Murti. So that means, is he saying that we have to meditate on the image of Bhagavan in the heart? Does it mean that?
Yes, but what is the true form of Bhagavan? Why we meditate on his form? Because his formless nature is our formless nature. So long as we don't know, so long as we mistake ourselves to be a form, we cannot know our formless nature and therefore cannot know his formless nature. Therefore, in our view, he seems to be a form. So it's appropriate for us to meditate on his form. But we meditate on that form with the understanding that his swarupa, his true form, is formless. So that is the worship of name and form is a bridge between our form-bound condition. We have bound ourselves to form. Ulupatriundam, as ego, we've come into being grasping form. We stand grasping form, grasping and feeding on form to flourish abundantly. So we are totally bound up with form. But by meditating on his form, because his form is the form of the formless. So the form in which he has appeared is a bridge for us to cross over, to return to our own formless nature. So how does Bhagavan serve as that bridge? He serves as the bridge by turning our mind back within. So we can say Ramana Murti is the external form of Bhagavan. But what is the true Ramana Murti? It's that which is shining in our heart as eye. So we can take it either way. If we meditate on the outward form of Bhagavan, he will, by the power of his grace, he'll turn our mind back within. As Bhagavan described very beautifully in verse 10 of Asuras Patikam, when he talks about those who think of Asuras even once, it will subdue the cheste, the mischievous activity. And he will draw them back to face itself, and thereby make it motionless like itself, and then feed upon them. So there Bhagavan is describing the process of grace, by which the grace works through that outward form. When we think of that outward form, it turns our mind back within.
Yeah.
Sadhu Om used to say, all the forms of this world, all the phenomena of this world, they all pull our mind outwards, except for two things, the peak of Aruṇācala and the two eyes of Bhagavan, they turn our mind back within.
So what's the significance of the peak of Aruṇācala? Why not the entire Aruṇācala? Why not the entire Aruṇācala? Why the peak?
When we come to a spiritual path, is our aim to rise up or to sink down?
Sink down.
When you sink down, where do you arrive at?
Where do you arrive at? At the bottom.
At the feet. At the feet.
Yes.
That is why all devotees, in all bhakti traditions of India, the feet of the Lord are held so high. Because the feet are our aim. Our aim is to sink down to the bottom.
No. You're talking about the peak of Aruṇācala. Peak. The peak.
The peak of Aruṇācala. When he said the peak of Aruṇācala, that's the focal point. When we look at Aruṇācala, the whole Aruṇācala is leading up to the peak. So just like when we look at Bhagavan, we look at his eyes. When we look at Aruṇācala, we actually are drawn to the peak. But I thought you were asking about feet. Peak, because if you see the form of Aruṇācala, the whole Aruṇācala is leading up to the peak, isn't it? So the natural focal point when you look at Aruṇācala is you look at the peak. The attention is automatically drawn there. And it's on the peak that Deepam is lit. So that's a sort of focal point.
One-pointedness, right? Yeah, it's a focal point. It's a one-pointedness.
Just like when we look at Bhagavan, we naturally, our attention is drawn to his eyes. When we look at Aruṇācala, our attention is naturally drawn to the peak.
Good. Thank you, Michael. So with that, let's go to the next song. I wanted to, so if you can be brief, that'll be helpful. And that is
being brief is not easy for me.
Basically, it's a significance of
Aruṇācala
Stuti Pañcakam, which is the 5 devotional songs that Bhagavan composed.
Aruṇācala Stuti Pañcakam.
Aruṇācala Stuti Pañcakam, the 5 songs that he composed. Then I know someone asked the significance, and then he composes verse. So can you give the meaning of this?
Can I just briefly give the context in which Sadhu Om composed it? This was maybe around 1956, 57, sometime around that time. At that time, Sadhu Om was living in the ashram. And during Bhagavan's lifetime, anyone who wrote to the ashram, the person who would reply to them would be Moni. Moni was Chinnaswami's right-hand man. And he handled all correspondence. I know he was a lawyer by profession, but he'd become a sadhu, but he was working only in the ashram office. But he definitely knew Tamil and English, and I think he may have known some other Indian languages. So generally, when any correspondence came, anyone wrote letters to Bhagavan, it would be Moni who would write replies on behalf of Bhagavan, but Bhagavan wouldn't ask him. Sometimes Moni would come and ask Bhagavan if he wanted some guidance. He would sometimes come to Bhagavan and say, someone has written like this, what should I reply? Sometimes Bhagavan would give some indication of what sort of reply would be sent, but the replies were sent by Moni. I don't know what happened to Moni. Somehow he sort of disappeared from the story after Bhagavan left the body. So by the mid-1950s, the person who was in charge of replying to that is, many devotees, after Bhagavan left the body, people sort of drifted away from the ashram. But after a few years, people started coming back to the ashram because they wanted to keep up that contact with Bhagavan. So many old devotees continued to write letters to Bhagavan, and they would send them to the ashram. So whenever any letters were received addressed to the ashram or to Bhagavan about spiritual matters, it was TKS, who was a retired schoolmaster, who would reply to them. One day, an old devotee wrote saying that he's not able to follow the path of self-investigation. He doesn't feel he's even surrendering himself properly to Bhagavan. But the one thing he's able to do, and he does religiously every day, is to recite Bhagavan's Aruṇācala Stuti Pañcakam, 5 hymns to Aruṇācala. So he wrote this in a prayerful manner. He wrote it. I don't know whether he addressed to Bhagavan himself or whether he addressed to the ashram, but he sent this letter. TKS didn't quite know what to reply to it. So he told Sadhu Om, he didn't say who had written the letter. He said someone has written saying they're not able to practice self-investigation. They don't even feel that they're very good at surrender. But every day they're reciting Aruṇācala Stuti Pañcakam. What should we reply to? What should I reply? Then Sadhu Om wrote this verse. What he says in this verse is Orunangenu marenul mudi unorai koreveleam, ulahopul chatayogamun unorai koreveleam. Tirumal shiva peruman panintil teleo koreveleam, shivayain karun kumaran tuti teleo koreveleam. Karuna karamuni nayakan Aruṇācala Ramanan kanibodaro tirum vaimala gatinayaka amudam Aruṇācala Stuti Pañcakam manam nam sayavariyin adupodamin aduvam adivudavai. The meaning of this verse is the first 4 lines are what he's saying. The first four lines. You have not known, or you have not understood the final conclusion of the peerless 4 Vedas. Kurevu ilayam. It's no loss. No, it doesn't matter. It's not a. It doesn't matter if you haven't understood the final import. The Mudivu implies Vedanta, the conclusion of the Vedas. So if you haven't understood Vedanta, it doesn't matter. Olaho pohul chata yogamun unarai koreveleam. You have not understood any of the 4 yogas that are glorified by the people of the world. It doesn't matter. It's no loss. Tirumal means Lord Vishnu. Shiva Peruman, Lord Shiva. Panindu ilayo. You have not worshipped Lord Vishnu or Lord Shiva. Kurevu ilayam. It doesn't matter. No loss. Shivai is the goddess, Devi. Ainkaran is the 5-armed one, that's Ganapati. Kumaran is Subramanya. Tutitu ileo. You have not praised the goddess, you've not praised Ganapati, you've not praised Subramanya. Kurevu ileam. It doesn't matter. None of these things matter. Then he comes to the first 2 lines are like that. Then he comes to the main point. Karunakara Muninayakan, Aruṇācala Ramanan. Aruṇācala Ramana, who is the Lord of Munis and the embodiment of grace. Kanivu Odu, with heart-melting love, Arul Tiruvaimala Gatinayaka Amudam Aruṇācala Stuti Pañcakam. That Aruṇācala Stuti Pañcakam, which is the ambrosia of immortality, which it's the Gatinayaka, it's the foremost of all paths, of all forms of upasana. This is the foremost, of all forms of worship. This is the foremost. And it was Arul Tiruvaimala. That's a beautiful way of expressing it. It can't adequately be translated into English. Arul means grace. Tiruvai means the holy mouth. Vaimala is the blossoming of the holy mouth. So that implies it was sung or composed, graciously composed by Bhagavan kanivu odu, with heart-melting love. So this Aruṇācala Stuti Pañcakam, which was composed with, which is the nectar of immortality and the foremost of all spiritual paths, which was sung with heart-melting love by Aruṇācala Ramana, who is the Lord of Munis and the embodiment of grace. Mananam Seya Varian. If you know how to do manana of Aruṇācala Stuti Pañcakam, if you know how to recite, well, it can, superficially it means recite, but it also implies to think deeply about the meaning of this Aruṇācala Stuti Pañcakam. Because when we recite these things, we shouldn't just be reciting it mechanically. These are heart-melting prayers and praises, and so much deep, deep meaning is there in Aruṇācala Stuti Pañcakam. So the recitation is just an aid to thinking deeply about it, doing the manana. So if you know how to do manana of Aruṇācala Stuti Pañcakam, adu podam, that is sufficient. Indru, now adu podam, that is now sufficient. What is it sufficient for? Ni adu arivu urave, to attain the knowledge you are that. So if you're able to, doesn't matter if you've not understood Vedanta, it doesn't matter if you've not done any of the 4 yogas, it doesn't matter if you've not worshipped Lord Vishnu or Lord Shiva, it doesn't matter if you've not praised Devi or Ganapati or Subramanya. If you're able to think deeply about the meaning of Aruṇācala Stuti Pañcakam, which is the foremost upasana, and the ambrosia of immortality, sung graciously with heart-melting love by Aruṇācala Ramana, the embodiment of grace and the Lord of Munis, that alone is sufficient. That alone is now sufficient to enable you to attain the knowledge you are that. Tattvamasi. It's beautiful, beautiful verse. So
Beautiful verse, yeah.
Sadhu Om composed this verse and gave it to TKS, and TKS sent it. The person who sent this was a person called N.R. Krishnamurti. He was a professor of physics in Madras College, or in Madurai College, I think. So he was an old devotee, very much older than Sadhu Om. So when he read this, he was so his heart was melted when he read this verse. So he at once came to Ramanashram to find out who had written this verse. And then TK said it was Sadhu Om, and then only Sadhu Om came to know that he had, for whom he had composed it. At the time of composing it, all he knew is some devotee said all they could do was Aruṇācala Stuti Pañcakam. In Sadhu Om's view, this alone is sufficient. Nothing else is necessary. Bhagavan's words had the power to bestow that knowledge, you are that. So if you recite it and think deeply about the meaning of it, that alone is sufficient.
Sir, have you updated its translations of these 2 verses, or these are the?
No, I haven't recently.
No, you haven't, yeah. Okay.
But the translation given in that book.
Translation is good though. What is in the book is pretty good.
Pretty good.
Yeah. So
actually, I think I did revise the translation of this second one, because towards the end of paramount importance, sometime in one of the last few installments, I recorded Sadhu Om telling this story, and so I translated. So what's in the paramount importance is my revised translation of it.